I should have listened to her when she first said it. I should have taken her words seriously. She told me with all the conviction a child could muster that they were coming. But I didn't. I laughed it off, told her it was just her imagination running wild, and dismissed it. How could I have known that ignoring her would lead to a nightmare that I would never wake up from? It all started one cold autumn evening. The kind of night where the air feels thick with something, an unease, a whisper of things unseen, and the wind howls, making the trees sway like they're bowing under some unseen weight. That night, I was sitting in the living room, reading a book while the fire crackled in the hearth. It was our usual evening routine. My daughter Lily was curled up in the armchair by the fire, her little legs tucked beneath her face illuminated by the soft flickering light. Her dark eyes, too wide for her small face, stared into the flames with an intensity that made me uneasy. It was then that she spoke. "They're coming, Daddy," she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the crackling fire. I looked up from my book, trying to ignore the cold chill that seemed to crawl up my spine. "Who's coming, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice too casual, masking the sudden prickle of dread that had begun to settle in my chest. Lily turned her head slowly, her gaze drifting towards the window, her small face pale in the firelight. "The ones in the dark," she whispered, "the ones with the faces." I blinked at her, unsure if I had heard her right. "What are you talking about, Lily? There's no one out there, it's just a story." But she didn't smile or laugh like I expected. Instead, she just looked at me with wide, serious eyes, as if she had seen something in the shadows that I hadn't. She pulled her knees closer to her chest, her small hands gripping the fabric of her pajamas tightly. "They're already here, Daddy," she continued, her voice trembling. "They're waiting." I tried to shake off the feeling of unease creeping into my bones, the sense that something was very wrong. I had been a police officer for 10 years, had faced dangers that would make most people run, and yet there was something about the way she said those words that made the room feel heavier, colder. "Sweetheart," I said gently, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "It's just your imagination. There's no one here. It's just the wind." But she didn't seem convinced. She glanced over her shoulder at the window again, her lips trembling as she whispered, "They're watching us, Daddy. They've been watching me for a long time. They want to take me." I chuckled nervously, trying to dismiss the panic that was bubbling up in my chest. "Honey, that's just a silly story. You're safe here with me. No one is going to take you." But she didn't respond. She just kept staring at the window, her eyes locked onto something I couldn't see. I ruffled her hair gently, trying to comfort her. "Why don't you go to bed? Tomorrow's a big day. You can sleep off all those silly thoughts." Lily didn't argue. She stood up from the chair, her small frame moving slowly, as if she wasn't quite sure she wanted to leave the safety of the room. As she walked towards the stairs, she turned back to me and said something that stopped me cold. "Daddy, please be careful. They're not going to stop. They want me, and if I'm not here, they'll come for you too." I dismissed it as another wild fantasy, but there was something about her voice that stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I sat back down in the armchair, staring into the fire. Later that night, I heard her calling out in her sleep. It wasn't a nightmare, not the kind of tossing and turning that I had grown accustomed to hearing. No, this was different. She was whispering something in her sleep, her voice barely audible, but there was a sense of urgency in it. "They're here, Daddy. They're here." I got out of bed, the cold night air biting at my skin as I stood in the hallway. I reached her room, and as I pushed open the door, I was met with silence. Lily was lying in her bed, her eyes closed in peaceful slumber, her breathing steady. For a moment I stood there, watching her, trying to reassure myself that it was just a bad dream. But then, I heard it, a soft tapping at the window. My heart stopped. It was the kind of sound that you can't ignore, like a whisper from the shadows, asking to be let in. I turned quickly, heading for the window, my hands shaking as I pulled the curtain back. There was nothing there. No one. Just the cold, dark night. I tried to laugh it off, tried to tell myself that it was just the wind. But my gut told me otherwise. That night I stayed awake, sitting in the chair by Lily's bed, watching the shadows flicker on the walls. The house was quiet, too quiet, and in the silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting just outside, something that had been watching us for much longer than I was willing to admit. In the morning, I brushed it off. I kissed Lily on the forehead and told her it was just a dream. But she looked up at me with those big eyes, her voice barely a whisper as she said, "They're coming, Daddy, you'll see." I should have listened. That was the beginning. And now, as I sit here writing this, I'm realizing just how much I ignored, how much I refused to acknowledge. And now, it's too late. They came for us, just like she said they would. And now, I'm paying the price for my ignorance. But you don't have to. You still have time. Listen to me, before it's too late. It's strange how everything can feel perfectly normal one moment and in the blink of an eye everything changes. Life as we know it can shift in a heartbeat, and that's exactly what happened the morning after Lily's warning. I went on with my day, thinking maybe I had let her imagination run wild. But as the day went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something that was no longer part of the normal world I'd known. It all started when I went to check the backyard. My wife, Olivia, had left for work early that morning, and Lily had been playing in her room. She was quieter than usual, and I didn't think much of it. Children have their moods, after all. But as I stepped outside to clear my head, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were strange markings in the dirt, marks that weren't there the night before. Long, deep scratches in the earth, as if something heavy had dragged its way across the yard. I knelt down, running my fingers over them, my heart thumping faster with each passing second. It wasn't just a simple animal track. No, these were something else entirely. They didn't make any sense. They were too irregular, too sharp. I glanced around the yard, searching for any clue as to what might have caused them. There was nothing. No sign of an animal. No evidence of a vehicle. Nothing at all that could explain the marks. The feeling of unease that had been gnawing at the back of my mind suddenly surged to the forefront. I stood up, my body tense. It was as if the yard had changed overnight. What was once familiar now felt foreign, even hostile. I walked back inside, determined to shake off the sense of foreboding that clung to me. I found Lily sitting in the living room, staring at the television. Her expression was distant, her eyes glazed over as though she was watching something that wasn't there. "Lily?" I asked softly, kneeling beside her. "Honey, are you okay?" She didn't respond at first. She just kept staring at the screen, her fingers tapping gently on the armrest of the chair. Her body was stiff, almost like she was in some sort of trance. "Lily," I said again, this time with more force. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Finally, she blinked and looked at me, her face pale. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're still here. I can feel them. They're watching me." I tried to hide the shock in my expression, but it was impossible. This wasn't the same as yesterday. This wasn't just a child's nightmare. This was something real. She wasn't imagining it anymore. Something was out there. Something was coming for her. I reached out and pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. "It's okay, Lily. You're safe here. They're not going to get you. I won't let them." But I wasn't so sure anymore. How could I protect her from something I couldn't even see? That night, everything seemed to go wrong. It started with a noise, an odd, unsettling scratching sound from outside. It was subtle at first, like a distant whisper, but it grew louder as the night wore on. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard. The sound was coming from the same part of the yard where I had seen those strange marks earlier. I grabbed the flashlight and headed for the back door. Lily was already in bed, her eyes wide open, staring into the darkness of her room. I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something I didn't. "Stay here, sweetheart," I said softly, trying to hide the unease in my voice. "I'll go check it out." I opened the door and stepped into the cold night air, my breath coming out in visible puffs. The scratching sound was louder now, almost as if something or someone was dragging itself across the ground. I walked cautiously toward the spot where I had seen the strange marks earlier, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. And then I saw it, a figure, tall, thin, with long limbs that stretched out unnaturally. Its body was cloaked in shadow, its movements jerky and disjointed, like it didn't belong in this world. It was dragging itself along the ground, its hands scraping the dirt, leaving a trail of deep, jagged gouges in its wake. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced with 100 questions, but none of them made any sense. Was this a person? A creature? Was this what Lily had been talking about? The figure didn't seem to notice me at first, but then it stopped. It tilted its head toward me, and for a moment, I thought it might speak. But then it did something far worse. It smiled. The smile wasn't human. It was wide, far too wide, stretching from ear to ear in a grotesque, inhuman grin. Its teeth were sharp, jagged, and yellow, and as it grinned, its eyes glowed with an eerie light. I stumbled backward, the flashlight trembling in my hands. "No," I muttered under my breath. "No, this can't be real." But it was, and it wasn't alone. More of them appeared in the shadows, stepping out from the dark corners of the yard, moving toward me with slow, deliberate steps. I turned and ran back toward the house, but the air seemed to grow thick around me. Every step felt heavier, as if the ground itself was trying to hold me down, keep me in place. I reached the back door and slammed it shut, my chest heaving. The scratching continued, louder now, from all sides of the house. They were surrounding us, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they came for. I rushed upstairs, my mind racing. I needed to protect Lily. I needed to keep her safe. But the fear that gripped me now wasn't just fear for her. It was fear for both of us. I had made a terrible mistake, and now I could feel the consequences closing in. I had ignored her warnings, dismissed her fears, and now I was paying the price. I looked at Lily, who was sitting up in her bed, her eyes wide with fear. She had heard it too. She knew they were out there. "They're coming, Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're already here." And this time, I couldn't deny it. They were here. I didn't sleep that night. The weight of the terror that had settled in the pit of my stomach kept me awake, eyes wide open, staring into the dark. The scratching sound continued from outside, growing louder with each passing hour. At first, I thought maybe it was just the wind, or an animal scavenging in the yard. But deep down, I knew better. Something was out there, something that didn't belong. Lily hadn't slept either. I could hear her softly crying from her room, her small sobs breaking the silence of the night. I wanted to comfort her, tell her it was all a bad dream. But I couldn't. I couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. I sat up in bed, my mind racing. I had to do something. I had to protect her. But what could I do? I was a police officer, a man trained to handle dangerous situations, yet nothing had prepared me for this. Nothing could explain what was happening. I didn't know who or what these creatures were, or why they had come for us, but I was starting to realize something far more terrifying. They weren't going to leave, not unless they got what they wanted. I stood up, my legs unsteady as I moved toward Lily's room. As I approached, I heard her whispering to herself. I pushed open the door, and there she was, sitting in the middle of the bed, hugging her knees to her chest, her wide eyes staring at the wall as if something was watching her. "Lily," I said softly, trying not to startle her. "Are you okay?" She turned to look at me, her face pale and drawn with fear. "Daddy, they're here." I didn't know what she meant. I didn't need to. The sound outside had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. The same kind of silence that precedes a storm. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I closed the door behind me and walked over to her, sitting beside her on the bed. "It's okay, honey," I said, though my voice sounded shaky even to my own ears. I won't let anything happen to you." But as I sat there, I could feel the darkness pressing in on us, could feel the weight of it bearing down on the house, on the very air we were breathing. It was like something was suffocating us, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Suddenly, the sound returned. A low growl, almost like the rumbling of thunder, coming from somewhere outside. But this wasn't thunder. This was different. It was deeper, more menacing. Before I could react, a loud bang echoed through the house, followed by another, and then the unmistakable sound of scratching. Closer this time, closer than ever before. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood up, looking around for something, anything, to defend us. The front door was locked and the windows were sealed tight, but I knew it wouldn't matter. The creatures were here, and they were already inside the house. The scratching continued, and then, from the corner of the room, I saw it. A figure, dark and looming, standing motionless in the shadows. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. My breath caught in my throat. It was tall, far too tall for a human, its body twisted and misshapen like something unnatural. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes, those eyes, they glowed a faint red, as if burning from the inside. Its mouth was a jagged line, stretched wide in a grotesque grin. It didn't move at first. It just stood there, staring at us, its glowing eyes locked on Lily. I felt my legs tremble beneath me, my mind screaming for me to run, but my body refused to obey. Lily gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, it's him, the one with the face." I turned to look at her, but when I turned back, the figure was gone, vanished, as if it had never been there. I blinked, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but there was no time to think. I grabbed Lily, pulling her toward the door. "Come on, honey, we need to get out of here. Now!" But as I reached for the door, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. The sensation sent a shock of ice through my veins, and I spun around, heart racing. But there was nothing there. No one. Just the empty, silent room. My mind was starting to unravel. This wasn't just a nightmare. This wasn't just a bad dream. It was real. I tried to steady my breath, trying to think. We couldn't stay here. Not anymore. But where could we go? How could I protect her when I couldn't even protect myself? I grabbed the phone from the nightstand and dialed Olivia's number. It rang twice, 3 times, and then went to voicemail. "Olivia, it's me," I said, my voice frantic. "Something's wrong. You need to come home. Please, just come home. Don't trust anyone. Don't—" The phone went dead. The silence in the room deepened, pressing in on me. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. There was no way out. No way to escape. That's when I heard the voice. It was soft at first, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it quickly grew louder, more insistent. A low, guttural sound, coming from somewhere deep within the walls. "Scott!" it called, its voice a terrible, unnatural thing. "We're coming for you!" I felt my knees go weak as the room began to spin. The voice echoed through my mind, louder now, as if it were inside my head, rattling around in my skull. Lily screamed, and I snapped back to reality. But it was too late. The door slammed open with a deafening crash, and I saw them, more of them, standing in the hallway, their twisted forms filling the doorway, their red eyes glowing in the darkness. I grabbed Lily, pulling her close. There was no escape. They had us now. I tried to fight, tried to push them back, but my hands passed right through them. It was like they weren't even real. They were shadows, illusions, things that should not exist. But they were here, and they weren't going anywhere. "Lily," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have believed you." And as they closed in on us, I knew it was too late. We were lost. The darkness was closing in. It pressed against me like a weight, suffocating, relentless. I held Lily tighter, my arms trembling as I tried to shield her from the nightmare unfolding before us. But no matter how hard I squeezed my eyes shut, no matter how desperately I tried to pretend that this was just some twisted dream, the reality of it was impossible to ignore. The creatures, if you could even call them that, were everywhere. Their forms, tall and twisted, moved with unnerving grace, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light that pierced the shadows. I could feel their presence, even when they weren't directly in front of me. They were everywhere, lurking in the corners of the room, crawling along the walls, their whispers filling my mind with maddening clarity. Lily's small body trembled in my arms, her breathing shallow and panicked. She was scared, terrified, and so was I. But I couldn't let her see it. I had to be strong for her. I had to protect her. I turned toward the window, my mind racing, looking for any way to escape. But as I approached, I saw it. The glass was covered in a thick, unnatural mist. The outside world was a blur, as if the night itself had been distorted, bent by some unseen force. The mist swirled and writhed like a living thing, pressing against the window, as if it were trying to reach in and grab us. I backed away quickly, pulling Lily with me. "We can't go out there, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice hoarse with fear. "We have to find another way." But Lily's wide, terrified eyes were fixed on the creatures. "Daddy, they're coming," she said, her voice breaking. "They're coming to take us." I shook my head, trying to fight the panic rising in my chest. "No, they're not. I won't let them take you. I won't let anything happen to you." But as I turned back toward the creatures, I realized how hopeless our situation truly was. They were getting closer, moving in slowly, methodically, like predators closing in on their prey. And as they did, the air grew colder. I could feel it now, the chill of something far beyond the natural world, a presence that made my skin crawl. I raised my hands instinctively, as if that would do anything to stop them, as if I could somehow push them away. But it was no use. The creatures' eyes glowed brighter, and their distorted forms seemed to blur and shift, their movements becoming more erratic. Then a voice echoed from somewhere deep within my mind, "You cannot escape." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The voice was no longer external, no longer a whisper from the darkness. It was inside me, resonating in my skull, vibrating through my very bones. "You will come with us." I shook my head violently, trying to clear my thoughts, but the voice was relentless. It spoke with such authority, such certainty, that I could feel my resolve crumbling. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I couldn't find the strength. The creatures were closer now, so close I could see the sickly, translucent skin that clung to their bones. I could see the sharp, jagged teeth bared in their wide, unnatural smiles. I could see the dark, empty hollows where their eyes should have been, now glowing with an ominous light. I could feel them pressing in on me, feel the weight of their presence suffocating me, making it hard to breathe. They didn't need to speak. Their mere existence was enough to paralyze me, to make me doubt everything I thought I knew about the world. They were not of this world. I knew that now. They were something else, something far worse. But Lily... I turned to her, my mind racing. She was still clinging to me, her face streaked with tears, her small hands clutching my arm as if I were her only lifeline. And in that moment I realized what I had to do. "Lily," I whispered urgently, my voice trembling. "You have to run. You have to get out of here." She looked at me, her face a mix of fear and confusion. "No, Daddy, I'm not leaving you." "You have to," I insisted, gripping her shoulders. "You have to go. Go to the car, to the neighbors, anywhere. Just get out of here. Don't let them take you." Lily shook her head, her eyes filled with desperation. "I can't leave you. I won't leave you." I could feel the tears pricking at my eyes as I looked down at her. She was so brave, so strong. But I couldn't let her stay. I couldn't let them take her. Not like this. "You're the only one who can stop them," I said, my voice choking. "You have to run, Lily. Please, for me, for you." I pushed her gently toward the door, my heart breaking with every step she took away from me. I wanted to run after her, to protect her, to hold her close and never let go. But I knew that if I stayed, if I allowed myself to be consumed by fear, there would be no hope for either of us. Lily hesitated at the door, her small form trembling with fear. "Daddy, I don't want to go." "I know, sweetie," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But you have to. You're strong. You can do this." With one last look, Lily turned and fled down the hallway. I watched her go, my heart breaking with every step. And then, just as I thought she was safe, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, purposeful, coming closer. And then, the terrible shriek of Lily's voice as she screamed out my name. "Daddy!" I didn't think. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, my legs burning with each step, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I couldn't think. I couldn't stop. I had to reach Lily. I had to get to her before they did. But it was no use. No matter how fast I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was too late. I could still hear her scream echoing in my ears, her desperate cry for help. It was like a knife in my chest, a constant reminder of how helpless I was. I burst out of the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The house felt different now, like it was closing in on me. The walls seemed to shift, and the floor creaked under my weight, as if the house itself was alive, breathing, pressing in on me from all sides. I reached the front door and flung it open, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Lily was out there, somewhere in the darkness. I had to find her. I ran down the front steps and out into the yard, my flashlight bouncing wildly in my hands as I searched for any sign of her. The scratching sound had returned, louder now, and I could feel the presence of the creatures, whatever they were, closing in around me. I stopped for a moment, trying to listen, trying to figure out where Lily had gone. And that's when I heard it. The faint sound of footsteps, barely audible, coming from the woods. My blood ran cold. The woods. She'd gone into the woods. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted toward the tree line, my pulse racing as I pushed through the thick underbrush, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The trees loomed above me, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The creatures were following me now, their presence a constant pressure against my chest, making it harder to breathe. I could feel them, their eyes on my back, their distorted forms lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let them catch me. Not when Lily was out there. Not when she was in danger. I called her name, my voice hoarse and frantic, but there was no response. The woods were silent, save for the sound of my own breath and the rustling of leaves underfoot. I pushed forward, my mind racing, my thoughts a blur of panic and fear. The wind howled through the trees, and the temperature seemed to drop even further, sending a chill through my bones. I couldn't see her. I couldn't find her. And then, I saw something. A flash of movement. Something white darting through the trees. My heart skipped a beat, and I took off after it, my feet pounding against the earth. "Lily!" I shouted, my voice breaking. "Lily, where are you?" I ran faster, faster than I thought possible, ignoring the exhaustion that was threatening to overtake me. I had to reach her. I had to keep going. I crashed through the underbrush, the branches snapping and tearing at my clothes, my legs burning with each step. And then, I saw her. Lily. She was standing in the middle of a clearing, her back to me, her small figure bathed in the eerie glow of the moon. She didn't move when I called her name. Didn't even turn around. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. Something was wrong. Lily wasn't moving. She wasn't even blinking. It was like she was frozen in place, trapped in some kind of trance. "Lily!" I cried again, my voice desperate. "Please, sweetie, come back!" But she didn't respond. She just stood there, staring into the darkness, her small hands hanging limply by her sides. That's when I saw them. The creatures. They were emerging from the shadows, moving silently toward her. Their long, twisted limbs stretched out toward her, their eyes glowing with that same sickly light. My blood ran cold as I realized what they were doing. They were here to take her. I couldn't let that happen. Not again. I had already failed her once. I wasn't going to fail her again. I charged forward, ignoring the pain in my legs, the exhaustion, the fear. I reached Lily just as one of the creatures stretched its long, gnarled hand toward her. "No!" I screamed, shoving the creature back with every ounce of strength I had. But it didn't move. The creature didn't flinch, didn't even seem to notice me. Instead, it smiled. Wide, grotesque, its mouth stretching far too far across its face. And then, it turned its glowing red eyes on me. "You shouldn't have come," the creature said, its voice a low, rumbling growl that echoed inside my skull. My heart stopped. I tried to move, to run, to protect Lily, but my body was frozen. The creature's gaze held me in place, as if its eyes alone had the power to paralyze me. Lily's small hand reached up, her fingers brushing against the creature's. It was like she was drawn to it, like she couldn't resist. "Lily, no!" I shouted, finally finding my voice. "Don't touch it, please!" But she didn't listen. Her eyes were empty, vacant, as if she were no longer in control of her own actions. The creature's smile widened, and it began to laugh, a low, guttural laugh that sent chills down my spine. And then, everything went dark. I couldn't see. The world around me was engulfed in a suffocating blackness that pressed against my skin like a heavy, wet blanket. It felt like I was drowning, lost in a void where nothing existed except for the cold, the fear, and the oppressive weight of the silence. But there was something else. Something I couldn't shake. A feeling that something was moving around me, something watching. I could feel it, the presence of the creatures. I didn't need to see them to know they were there. I could feel their eyes, burning into me, their cold breath brushing against my skin. I tried to move, to shake off the paralyzing fear that gripped me, but it was no use. My body refused to obey. Every part of me felt like it was locked in place, as if I were trapped in some kind of nightmarish trance. 7. The creatures were closer now. I could hear them moving in the dark, their footsteps slow and deliberate, echoing in the silence. They weren't rushing. They didn't need to. They knew I couldn't escape. They knew I was already lost. I could hear their whispers, too, soft and mocking like the wind through the trees. But there was something in the sound that made my blood run cold. They were speaking, but not to me. It was like they were talking to each other, as if I weren't even worth their attention. But I could feel their gaze, their eyes boring into me, waiting for the right moment. The silence was shattered by a scream. "Lily!" I jerked awake, my heart pounding in my chest. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, my body trembling as I scrambled to my feet. But there was nothing around me. No creatures, no Lily. Just the same suffocating darkness that had trapped me moments before. I spun around, trying to get my bearings, but it was like I was standing in a void. There was no ground beneath me, no sky above me, just an endless expanse of blackness that stretched on forever. "Lily!" I called out, my voice cracking. "Lily, where are you?" But my voice seemed to disappear into the darkness, swallowed by the empty void. There was no response, no sound, just silence. My mind raced, the panic rising like a tidal wave. What had happened? Where was she? Was she still out there? I tried to push forward, but every step felt like I was wading through thick mud. It was as if the very air itself was holding me back, suffocating me, pulling me deeper into the void. And then, I heard it. A low, rumbling growl. It came from all around me, vibrating in my chest, sending waves of dread coursing through my veins. I wasn't alone. They were here. The creatures were here, and they were closing in. I spun around, my heart racing, my hands shaking as I tried to make sense of the darkness around me. But the growl wasn't the only sound. There was something else, something far worse. A voice. A voice that wasn't my own. "Scott," it whispered. The voice was deep, resonant, and carried a strange weight to it, as if it was speaking from the very depths of my mind. It sent a shiver down my spine. "Scott, you've already lost." The voice seemed to echo in the darkness, the words reverberating through me. I tried to move, to scream, to fight back, but my body wouldn't respond. The weight of the darkness pressed against me, holding me in place, making it impossible to escape. I could feel them now all around me. The creatures. I couldn't see them, but I knew they were there. I could feel their presence, their eyes, burning into me. They were waiting, watching. And then, the voice spoke again, its tone more insistent this time. "You will never escape. You cannot fight us. You cannot run from us. We have already claimed you." A cold, icy hand gripped my heart. My pulse thudded in my ears as the voice continued, each word a hammer striking at my mind, breaking through the walls I had built. "You should have listened. You should have believed her." "Lily." The words rang in my mind, loud and clear. I should have believed her. I should have listened when she told me they were coming. But it was too late. She had warned me, but I had ignored it. I had dismissed her, brushed it off as nothing more than a childish fear. And now, here I was, trapped in this nightmare, surrounded by creatures that weren't even real. Or maybe they were real. Maybe this was their world, a place where the rules of reality didn't apply. I dropped to my knees, my hands gripping my head as I struggled to breathe. My thoughts were a whirlwind spinning out of control. And then I saw her. Lily. She was standing in front of me, her small form bathed in an eerie glow. Her eyes were empty, vacant, like she wasn't really there. She didn't speak, but her mouth moved, forming words that I couldn't hear. I reached out to her, my hand trembling. "Lily," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But she didn't respond. She didn't even look at me. She just stood there, a silent figure in the darkness, her face expressionless, her hands hanging by her sides. And then, as if she were no more than a shadow, she vanished. I gasped, my heart pounding. She was gone. She had disappeared, like she was never there. The cold dread that had gripped me only deepened, as if I had lost her forever. I didn't know how much time had passed. The world around me had become nothing but an endless, oppressive black void. I was alone, trapped. And then, just as suddenly as it all began, the darkness lifted. I found myself standing on solid ground again. The fog, the shadows, the creatures, all of it was gone. But in its place there was something worse. A single figure standing in front of me, Lily. Her face was blank, her eyes hollow. She looked at me, her lips moving, but no sound came out. And then, her mouth stretched wide, her face contorting into a grotesque smile, and I understood. She wasn't my daughter anymore. I stood there, frozen, staring at Lily. The smile on her face twisted and unnatural, stretching far beyond what should have been possible. It was no longer her, a hollow imitation of the girl I had once known, an echo of the daughter I'd failed to protect. Her eyes, once filled with curiosity and innocence, now glowed an unsettling shade of red, flickering like embers in the dark. Her lips, once soft and full of life, were now pulled into that grotesque smile, revealing sharp, jagged teeth that seemed too large for her small mouth. She didn't look like Lily. She didn't even look human. The air around me grew colder, and the silence thickened. I felt as if I were suffocating, trapped in this strange world where the rules of reality no longer applied. It wasn't just the creatures. It was her. The real Lily had been replaced with something else, something that shouldn't exist. She took a step forward, her movements slow and deliberate, the sound of her footfalls echoing in the stillness. Every step she took made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, as if something unseen was drawing closer with each passing second. "Lily," I whispered, my voice breaking. Please, baby, don't do this. She didn't respond. Her eyes, locked on mine, seemed to pierce through me, as if she could see into my very soul. I felt naked before her, exposed and vulnerable. This thing, this creature, had taken everything from me, and now it was all I had left. It took another step. I could feel it now. The weight of my mistakes, the crushing realization of how far I had fallen. I had ignored her warnings. I had dismissed her fear. The price of that ignorance was standing before me now, wearing my daughter's face, twisted beyond recognition. In a split second, the creature lunged at me. I barely had time to react, my instincts kicking in as I stumbled back, trying to put distance between us. But it was too fast. It grabbed my arm with an unnatural strength, its fingers digging into my flesh like claws. I screamed out in pain, but the sound was swallowed by the void. "You shouldn't have come," the creature hissed, its voice now a harsh, guttural growl, as if it were coming from deep within the earth itself. "You could have stayed away, but you wanted to be a hero. You wanted to protect her." I tried to pull away, to break free, but it only tightened its grip. The creature's smile widened, and I felt a cold, sickening wave of fear wash over me. It was too strong, too powerful. There was no fighting it. "You failed," it said, its voice dripping with malice. "You failed her." The words stung, but they were nothing compared to the weight of the guilt that crushed me from the inside. I had been so sure that I could protect her, that I could stop whatever was coming, but I had been wrong. I had failed her, and now I was paying the price. "Lily, please," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "Please don't let it be you. You're not like this. You're my daughter." But the creature only tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing as if considering my words. Then, with a cruel laugh, it spoke again. "Your daughter is gone. She has been for a long time. She belongs to us now." In that moment, everything I had known, the world, my life, the safety I had taken for granted, collapsed. I was not just facing something evil. I was facing a force far beyond my comprehension. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting for this moment. Something that had already claimed my daughter and was now coming for me. I had no strength left to fight. I could feel the darkness closing in again, swallowing me whole. I thought of Lily, the real Lily, the girl I had failed. And then, I thought of Olivia, if she was still out there. But no matter how much I wanted to reach her, I knew the truth. It was too late. The last thing I heard before the darkness took me was the creature's laugh, the laugh that echoed in my skull, deep and resonant, as it filled the space between us. I awoke to a sharp, unnatural silence. The darkness around me had lifted, but it was replaced by an overwhelming stillness that was just as suffocating. I wasn't sure where I was. Everything felt wrong. The air felt heavy, thick, and the ground beneath me seemed unfamiliar, as if I was standing on some kind of alien terrain. I tried to move, but my limbs felt like they were made of lead. I couldn't understand it. What had happened? The last thing I remembered was the creature, its twisted grin, and the chilling words that rang in my ears. "You failed." I closed my eyes, trying to clear my head. But when I opened them again, I saw her. Lily. She was standing before me, but she wasn't the same. The hollow, lifeless version of her from before was gone. This time her face was calm, almost serene, but her eyes, those eyes, were no longer glowing with that sickening red. They were normal. But there was something about them. Something off. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice soft, almost distant. "Lily," I breathed, reaching out for her, my heart pounding. My hands shook as I touched her arm, feeling the warmth of her skin, the reality of her presence. But it didn't feel right. Lily looked up at me, her lips curling into that same eerie smile that had once sent a shiver down my spine. "You shouldn't have come back, Daddy." I froze, my heart sinking in my chest. Her voice was different, colder, distant. The warmth that had been there was gone. I couldn't understand it. Was this really my daughter? Was this really Lily? I had to, I whispered, my voice trembling. I couldn't leave you. You should have, she said simply, her smile widening. You should have let me go. The world around me seemed to shift, the ground quaking beneath my feet as the air grew thick with a pressure I couldn't describe. It felt like the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. I tried to reach out for her, to pull her close, but she took a step back, vanishing into the growing darkness that seemed to surround me. No, I gasped. Lily, don't go. Please don't leave me again. But she was gone. And in her place, the dark figures appeared once more. The creatures. Their glowing eyes locked on me, and I felt the weight of their presence pressing in from all sides. It was like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The creatures didn't need to move. They were everywhere, filling every corner of the space. I could hear their whispers in my mind, their voices cold and mocking. You were warned, Scott, one of them said, its voice a low hiss. You should have listened. You should have stayed away. The realization hit me like a blow to the chest. I had been warned, over and over again. But I hadn't listened, and now I was paying the price. You failed her, the creature continued. You failed all of them. The pain, the guilt, crushed me all over again. It was my fault. I had ignored Lily. I had dismissed her fears. I had put her in danger, and now there was nothing left. No way to fix it. No way to undo the damage I had caused. I sank to my knees, tears streaming down my face. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. I'm so sorry. The creatures circled around me, their laughter echoing in my ears. I couldn't escape. I couldn't fight them. The darkness was closing in, swallowing me whole, and I realized there was no escaping the consequences of my ignorance. I had failed, and now there was nothing left but the void. The creatures encircled me, their twisted forms flickering in and out of the darkness, their laughter still echoing in my skull. The pressure in the air was suffocating, pushing down on me as if the weight of the world was collapsing in on itself. The ground beneath my knees felt cold, unyielding, like the earth itself had turned its back on me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The only thing that filled my mind was the image of Lily, the real Lily, and the guilt that gnawed at me, tearing me apart from the inside. You failed her, Scott, one of the creatures hissed. Its voice was low, mocking, carrying the weight of 1,000 judgments. And now, you will join her, forever. I tried to push myself to my feet, but the force holding me down was too great. My muscles screamed in protest, but I couldn't move. I was trapped in this place, in this nightmare, with no way out. But then, something changed. A shift in the air, a spark of warmth. I looked up. Through the darkness, I saw something. Someone, approaching. The figure was faint at first, like a shadow emerging from the mist. But as it came closer, I recognized her. Lily. Her eyes were no longer hollow, no longer glowing with that sick red light. Her expression was calm, serene, and yet there was something else there, something that felt like forgiveness. She was standing in front of me, her small hand outstretched, her fingers reaching toward me. Daddy, she said softly, her voice steady and strong. You can still save us. My heart skipped a beat. Was this really her? Was this my daughter? Or was it just another trick? I looked into her eyes, searching for any sign that this was the same thing I had seen before, the hollow version of Lily. But all I saw was a quiet, unyielding strength. And somewhere deep inside, I felt something stir. Hope. Lily, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. I'm so sorry. I couldn't protect you. I couldn't save you. Her expression softened and she shook her head. You didn't know, but you can still make things right. You can stop this. Stop them. It's not too late. The creatures circled closer, their grins growing wider, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. They didn't want me to listen to her. They didn't want me to have a chance. But in that moment, I realized something. The power they had over me. The fear. The guilt. The overwhelming weight of failure. It only existed because I had let it. I had been consumed by it. I had let the darkness take control. But now, Lily was here. She was offering me a choice. A way out. "You have to fight, Daddy," she said, her voice carrying a finality that made my heart race. "You have to make the choice." I looked down at her outstretched hand, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a glimmer of something other than fear. I felt resolve. I knew what I had to do. I took her hand. The moment our hands touched, the creatures recoiled, their grotesque faces twisting in anger and confusion. Their eyes flared with fury, their whispers growing into howls of rage. But it didn't matter anymore. They couldn't stop me. I felt the weight lifting from my chest, the darkness receding like a nightmare fading at dawn. The creatures screeched, fading into nothingness, their voices dying out as if they had never existed. The air cleared, the cold that had settled into my bones vanished, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. Lily stood beside me, her hand still in mine, her smile soft but knowing. "You made the right choice," she said, her voice filled with warmth. I looked at her, my heart swelling with love and regret. "I should have listened, Lily. I should have believed you." She nodded as if she understood. "It's okay, Daddy. We're okay now." And as I stood there with her, in the quiet aftermath of the chaos, I realized that I had learned the most important lesson of all. There are things in this world that we can't see, that we can't understand. But that doesn't mean they aren't real. And sometimes the greatest strength comes from listening to those around us, even when it's hard to believe. I had failed her once, but now I had a chance to make it right. And that, for now, was enough.